When should your therapy practice become an S-corporation? My name is Tony Cameron with TLDR Accounting, and we provide tax and accounting services to therapists in private practice. Now, one of the common questions we get is, at what point should your practice elect to become an S-corporation? So I've seen a lot of different numbers thrown around about this, how much income you should be making, or the thought that you should become one straight from the beginning. And a lot of folks just asking questions about what they should be doing and how does it change things, and just what are the things they should be thinking about. So the first thing I always ask is, are you a PLLC or an LLC? So in Washington, you're required to be a PLLC if you're providing mental health services. So if you've already done that step, cool, you hit the first checkbox off. If you're not, then I highly recommend that you do become one, since what I recommend is, if you do become an S-corporation, if it makes sense, you make the election from your PLLC, and then it just gets treated as an S-corporation. It's the easiest way to go about doing this. It gives you additional options down the road, and you can do it early in the beginning, becoming a PLLC. And then when it's time and it makes sense, which is what we're going to discuss today, when does it actually make sense for your practice, then you can make the election and get payroll set up and all of that and become an S-corporation. It doesn't require you to change anything. But if you're not already a PLLC or an LLC, you should get one set up. It does provide an additional shield in between you and your practice. Now, it does mean you should have things like separate bank accounts that are the bank account is set up under your business, not under your social security number, but under your EIN for your LLC. And it's just one of the things that it's the first checkbox I ask. And if you've done it, great, we can move on and then start talking about your numbers. So when we're talking about your numbers, you have to be earning a certain amount of money for it to be worth it to become an S-corporation. So one of the things I talk about is, are you going to have more money in your pocket, right? Because the whole reason you're thinking about it is you want more money in your pocket. Now, a lot of times you'll see some articles or folks are talking about, yeah, I saved this amount in taxes. That's great. Saving $900 in taxes is fantastic, but you're going to have additional expenses for your S-corporation, right? It isn't as simple as just being a single member LLC or PLLC. There are additional things you need to do, and they cost money. Saving $900 on your taxes isn't going to cover those expenses. A big expense is you need a separate tax return. So if you're a single member LLC, you report your business on your personal tax return. As an S-corporation, you have a separate tax return. Now, those tend to cost $750 and up. If they're bigger, they tend to cost more. If they're pretty small and simple, then they're a little bit less. But you need to make enough savings in taxes to cover those expenses, because that's not the only expense. You also have reasonable compensation. That means that you need to set up payroll for your S-corporation. And we have recommendations for payroll, but it still requires you to have a monthly software cost. So then now you got monthly software costs, and it's like, okay, at what point do you save enough in taxes to be able to cover all of these expenses and have money in your pocket after it, right? Because you need to have enough of a return on the investment to make it worthwhile. Now, my recommendation is you don't even start looking at the information until you're at least making $80,000 gross. Now, if you have a ton of expenses, so say you have a billing company, you already have an admin, or you have a virtual assistant who's taking care of things, maybe you have someone who's updating your website, and you have a lot more than normal expenses, even $80K isn't enough. You need closer to $100K to really make it worth it. The biggest reason why I say that is because you're going to need reasonable compensation, also known as a reasonable salary. Now, one way to think about a reasonable salary is, what would you pay someone where you currently live to do what you do? Now, that could be super easy. Maybe you check on salary.com or Glassdoor and you pull some expenses, some salary ranges from therapists in your area with your licensing, because it does depend on your licensing, right? Do you have one license? Do you have a PhD? Are you doing testing? All those things factor into what your reasonable salary is. And another way that we do it is we ask for all the things you do during the week, because you're not just meeting with clients, right? You're booking appointments with clients, you're billing your insurance companies if you take insurance, you're doing your accounting work, you're doing your marketing work. Is your Psychology Today profile up to date? Are you keeping track of all your client notes in Simple Practice or Therapy Notes or one of those software? And so just meeting with your clients isn't enough, because you're also running your small business. And so time is allocated towards those. So what we recommend is not just going on a salary.com and pulling a salary that you see there. We recommend we look at what you're doing and how many hours you're spending in your practice, and then we come up with your salary that way. We tend to do salary reports for all of our clients that are S corporations, meaning we ask them to keep track of their time over the course of a month. We average it out, and then we look at all the things that they're doing and come up with hourly wages for each of those and extrapolate it out. Sounds complicated. You don't need to do it that way, but we have software that does it. And if that sounds like, yes, Tony, just do that for me, you can schedule an appointment. We can discuss it. But in general, if you're looking at, well, should I even be talking about that? Like, is it time? Are you making 80 to 100K gross? If the answer is yes, that's your second checkbox saying, yes, this is a good idea. Now, the third checkbox is it goes back to your accounting. How are you keeping track of your books, right? Are you keeping track of them on a monthly basis? Do you know how much money you're earning? Because if you don't, then it's really hard to estimate, are you making 80 to 100K? The second part of that statement does relate back to that PLLC question is, are your books separate? So you have business bank accounts for all of your business accounts. Is your income and expenses flowing through there? Are you keeping up on your bookkeeping so you know what you've made last month, right? Or are you only looking at that once a year and only pulling your expenses in once a year? Because this comes back to, if you're an S corporation, we got to run payroll, which means you need to know how much money you're making on a month-to-month basis to make sure you have enough cash in your business bank account to run payroll, right? It becomes one of those, do you have enough money to do the thing, right? So that's the third checkbox, is how are your books? Are they up to date? Do you know what's going on in your business? And then the last checkbox, which we ask, and this is the one that does hold up a lot of people, is how do you feel about the added complexity? So as a single member LLC or PLLC, you can keep track of your bookkeeping in Excel. You only worry about your P&L, your profit and loss statement. You can take care of everything. It's a simpler business form, right? If you're never adding employees, if you're not going to have a receptionist, if you're making as much money as you want to and you're not hitting that 80 to 100K, but you're fine with that, that could be fine. But if you're okay with the added complexity, spending the time on the payroll if you're not going to outsource it, you have an additional tax return. There are additional ways to go about and doing savings around S corporations, which are more complex than we're getting into today. But if you're not comfortable with that, then you need to be able to afford to outsource it. And if that's a no, then maybe you shouldn't become an S corporation. So the big the big 3 areas and then a bonus question is, are you already a PLLC or an LLC, depending on your state rules? Are you making enough money? So that would be at least 80 to 100K, right? 60K, much, much harder to get away with it because your salary should be starting in that range, depending on how often you're working. And then, are your books in order, right? That's the third one. Are your books in order? And then the bonus question is the added complexity. Are you someone who likes to take care of their taxes and TurboTax each year? It's super simple, takes you 5 minutes. You don't want to deal with anything else. If the answer is, you don't want to deal with anything else, it's not for you. If the answer is, yeah, I can handle that, or I can outsource it, then yes, we should have a conversation about becoming an S corporation and will it save you in taxes? One of the other questions I always get is, well, is it actually worthwhile? And that's going to depend on where your reasonable compensation ends up falling. Say you make 100K, your expenses are 10K a year because you only have some software fees, some internet fees, some phone fees, your licensing fees, continuing education. And so you have $90,000 left. Say your salary is salary plus payroll taxes end up being $75,000. Now that leaves you with $15,000 a year in net income that you don't pay self-employment taxes on. Because self-employment taxes, when you file on your personal tax return, all of your income gets hit with that. But when you're an S corporation, only your payroll's hit with that, and then it's just normal taxes. So you can kind of guesstimate how much you're going to save by becoming one, looking at it that way. We also, if you want someone to help walk you through it and have that conversation, does this make sense for me? That's one of the things that we can help you with. Hopefully you found this helpful. If so, subscribe below.